So, talking a little bit about, you know, most of your couples are getting to about a year and a half in advance, right?
Mhm.
At what point do you start reaching out to them to really nail down a schedule? Because I know that's something that
Mhm.
for us on the video side, like we do work with photographers all the time to
Mhm.
like make sure that we are on the same page with
Yes.
schedules and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to know from, from the photography side, like how soon do you actually start working with the couples? Like we need to start nailing down a schedule.
Mhm.
What's that time frame look like?
Yeah. I would say about, 1.5 to 2 months out.
Okay.
I want to make sure that the venue and, if they have a planner, got to make sure that, they're the first step. And then photography is the next thing. So just kind of plugging that in. But I find around the 1.5 to 2 month mark is when they, their planner or their venue is kind of wrapping up their like skeleton of the timeline. And then all of us other vendors kind of fill in everything. So I think that's a pretty good point when, we check back in and everything. And I work on photography like timelines with my couples and make sure that, down to the minute, they know, like everyone knows when and where they're needed for photos.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like spot on to exactly kind of what we do is about 1 to 2 months out. And I feel like some couples appreciate waiting to that point, but some will reach out earlier. Like, when do we need to start talking about this? I was like, well, what do you know so far about your wedding day?
Yep.
And a lot of times I'll kind of ask them like, well, do you have a photography schedule already? Because if you have a photography schedule, we can kind of just mimic a lot what's going on there.
Yep.
And just piggyback a little bit. There's some things where we may give some suggestions, but we never are pushy about it. That's for sure. So usually your schedule is so much clean and like is already pre-built and you know exactly what you're doing. So those are like definitely things to be considering if you're a wedding couple out there is like, think about 1 to 2 months out that you're going to actually reach out to your photographer, your videographers, and really start to narrow that schedule down because they need to know too. And like, like we do before is we will give advice, oh, maybe there's not enough time between getting ready and going to the ceremony and starting getting details and things like that.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll kind of crunch everything up and we'll be like, okay, well, we need a little bit more time spaced out somehow. And that's where we kind of come in with our expertise and like tell them like, have you thought about this? Like let's think about like shifting this here. And for you, especially like when we talk about bridal portraits and things like that, let's shift all those things earlier in a day and not after the ceremony, because after the ceremony, we can get to group photos and then you can go enjoy cocktail hour, instead of like, it's all photos afterwards and then straight into reception, and they don't get to enjoy the moment. So